You have shuffled, reimagined, and recreated yourself over the years and reinvented yourself and very successfully. And so, what I
Thank
kind
you.
of want to start with at this point is think back, tell me about Lisa 20 years ago.
Wow. Well, I had about the time that you and I met, the company that I was working for in Wirt County sold out to a company in Chicago. And I had learned through the company Hampton Ridge Magic, I had learned at that time how to post video, how to create websites, how to, you know, I did their online catalog for, they had 3,500 items. I did a desktop catalog for them, the first one ever in the industry. We provided the first ever color packaging in the wholesale magic industry. So I learned all those skills through the company that I was working for, and then they left. But of course,
Hmm.
at that time it was clunky and clumsy. And if you were on dial up, video and photos and images were just a nightmare. I mean, everything that I learned then, um, is outdated now. I mean, I still have my little Snappy, which was a plug-in that let you take a photo from a camera to a computer. I mean, everything I learned then is was obsolete. I mean, today it doesn't even work. So I had these skills from that I'd learned from that company, and I just wanted to keep going with them, I guess I would say. I started a blog back then, just
Hmm.
because as a writer, you want an outlet. And I know there are a lot of writers out there that write and don't let anybody read their stuff, but I only feel like a writer if somebody reads what I
Mm.
write, kind of like if a tree falls in the wood, does it make noise? If I write and
Yeah.
nobody reads it, am I really a writer? So we went from when you and I met, I was in Mason County doing West Virginia cottages. Um, I had partnered with someone on that, and their life kind of fell apart on them. So that all fell apart. But then Ridge Magic hired my husband and I to go to Chicago. I set up the computers and the desktop publishing and the wholesale inventory, and he worked in the warehouse. And there was a 0% unemployment in Chicago then, and they really
Hmm.
wanted us to stay and offered us, significant salaries if we stayed in Chicago, but we just hated Chicago. I mean, I couldn't drive there. The driving was insane.
Hmm.
You know, if you wanted to enjoy the outdoors, you had to go to a park, or you didn't have it right outside your door. So then we came back to West Virginia. And for a while, I worked at Glenville State College as a desktop publisher and website designer. But you know, I'm an academic, but I'm not an academic. So I get frustrated in an academic environment. Um, my priorities don't align with a lot of academia. And I grew up on college campuses. My father was a college administrator. My mother was a grammar English speech professor. So as a little kid, I didn't care who the college president was, or I didn't care who was a doctorate or who wasn't.
Hmm.
My father was the vice president of Washington State Community College. So, everybody at the college is just the same to me. And I still see it that way as an adult, even though I know how hard people work for their degrees.
Right.
Um, so I just couldn't, I've always wanted to get into academia, and 20 years later, I still can't. I
Well, now You are in
Okay.
a way.
Well, again, in a public, I'm a public librarian now, so that's
Mhm,
education for the audience that I appreciate.
mhm,
Um, for practical life information. It's not academia for the sake of academia. It's life. So I worked at the college for a little bit, and then because I had done the Magic wholesale website and the catalog and that type of thing, I launched my private business because many of their clients um, hired me as a private consultant or as a contractor to do their websites and to do their packaging and to do things like that. Because again, up until the late 90s, um, wholesale magic had, again, no serious kind of catalog of what was available to store owners, things like that. They had
mhm,
no picture catalog, they had no websites. Um, we did videos that showed how to do the magic tricks because at that time, most magic tricks were produced in China, but then translated into English by someone who was Chinese speaking. So when you got the instructions for the trick, a lot of people couldn't figure it out. So I was doing technical writing, I was retranslating or
right,
reworking instructions. So all of those things were kind of tossed into my lap right after I finished my BA. Um, so I had this degree in writing, but then I had all these opportunities in these on-site, on-the-job education with the internet and
mhm,
video and
mhm,
photo and desktop publishing and technical writing. And that really kind of hooked me in to what you could do with the internet. Now, again,
mhm,
back then it was clunky and difficult and took you
right.
hours upon hours
Yes,
upon hours upon
yes.
hours. I mean, just think
It
what it
wasn't
would
drag
take
and
for you
drop.
and I. Right, right. Or
No.
what we would have to go through just to have this video conversation.
Oh,
It
my,
just
yeah.
it seems like every 5 years I have to upgrade my knowledge, and the older
Mhm.
I get, the slower I am to
I
keep
I
up.
I I can totally agree with that because as I'm trying to get back and I never actually left, but I was kinda just over here, you know, checking in ever so often, and suddenly I'm getting these messages that, my WordPress plugins won't update, and I go in and I get a hold of my host, and they're like, "Well, your stuff's in the back is so far out of date. When we update it, it just breaks everything." So, and by the way, the company whose uh, template you used has been out of business about 3 or 4 years. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is
Oh,
terrible."
yes.
So then I'm trying to redo and it's just been so long since I had to get behind the screen and look at the stuff in the back.
Mhm.
It just is a nightmare, but so
Mm.
I do relate there. There's a lot of similarities even though we're on different roads there. So go ahead.
Yes.
Using
So my
publishers,
my time
you
at the
know.
college. Yeah. Hey, I still have a computer that I don't plug into the internet, so I can still use Corel Draw and PageMaker. I mean,
PageMaker.
that's
I
how
I
old,
used to
how
love
far.
PageMaker,
I
yeah.
love
I might still
PageMaker.
have a
I
hard
love
drive somewhere
PageMaker.
with that on there, but, because I've got, uh, um, towers in different rooms in different buildings across the whole place. There's so many different versions because I have nowhere
Mhm.
to get rid of the stuff, so and then my father-in-law rebuilds well, he doesn't rebuild them, but he upgrades, laptops that he gets from surplus property, and then he says, "Here, you need a new one?" It's like, "But you only gave me one 3 months ago." "Okay, fine." And so I've got these everywhere. I
Yeah.
love him. I don't wouldn't take him to give him back. I mean, I love it, but every time you have to do a new laptop. But go ahead. I don't mean
Well,
to interrupt you
that's okay. I've been fortunate now that I think about it because, I had my degree, then I got all that on the job training at Hampton Ridge. And then I went to the college, and even though I really couldn't get myself in their groove. My time at the college when I left there, that was what led me to the opportunity to be a reporter for the Calhoun Chronicle. And I was a reporter, newspaper reporter, and columnist at the Calhoun Chronicle for 4 years. Now, being a newspaper reporter is kind of like going behind the scenes of Disney World.
Mhm.
Your community kind of loses its magic for you, right? And that's when I learned very quickly the power one can have in a community when you work and write for a newspaper. Um,
Mhm.
I got stalkers. I was stalked by this group called the Secret Seven.
Mm.
Every time I left the farm, they knew it. I had, of course, people come up and get in my face and scream at me because they swear they didn't say that. And then I'd pop out my tape recorder and play it back for them and say, yes, you
Mhm.
did.
Yeah.
And so by 4 years in, the stress of that position and the awareness that came with keeping track of everyone and everything that was going on in the community really began interfering with my private life. I
Mhm.
had the stalkers, I was losing sleep, I was very anxious. We were getting calls in the middle of the night. I'd done an investigation into a state police investigation. So my husband was getting pulled over by state police. I was getting pulled over.
Mhm.
So I just left that job. I mean, I just
Mhm.
woke up one day and went, I can't, I can't do this anymore.
Mhm.
And in looking for another job, I interviewed for this women's magazine and that was being put out in Parkersburg. And I went to the interview and I came home and basically they wanted me to do everything, layout, photo taking, copy editing, writing. The only thing I wouldn't be doing is delivery. And I sat down with Frank and told him, what they expected and what they wanted. And of course, it was in Parkersburg, which is, over an hour away.
Mhm.
And he said, well, if you're gonna do all the work, um, why not just do your own magazine?
Mhm.
Um, so again, I have to give Frank the credit for coming up with the idea and putting that in front of me and knowing that I could. Might not have ever occurred to me to just go, oh, I'm I'm going to do my own magazine. Um, so we started Two Lane Living within 7 months, and I didn't know if anybody would read it. I mean, the columnists were people I knew that I wanted to learn from. I had a friend who was about the importance of nutrition and,
Mhm.
we are what we eat. I had a friend, Bill Church, who knew about medicinal plants and herbs in our area. These were all things I was interested in.
Right.
I didn't know if anybody else would be interested in those. And so originally we were going to print 8,000 copies and deliver to 8 counties. The first 8,000 copies were gone in 2 days.
Yeah.
So, and then the next, I was like, okay, maybe it's a fluke. So the next month, 8,000 copies were gone in 2 days. And so then we increased to 9,000 copies and then 10,000 copies. And then, other people in other counties wanted to get copies. And we had folks coming up and saying, hey, if you bring me 50 copies where I work in Calhoun, I'll take them back to Ritchie County or I'll take them on down to Clay County. And And these, were volunteers. And so
Mhm.
by the time 10 years later, by the time we wrapped it up 10 years later,
Mhm.
we were printing 18,000 copies,
Mm.
distributing to 18 counties, reaching an average of 40,000 readers a month. Never in 10 years did we have more than 1% of copies left over. So we carried a 99% readership rate for 10 years.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know of any other publication that has
And
that
you
kind of
had
numbers, right?
a few mail subscriptions as well, didn't you?
We yeah, we had about 100 mailed subscriptions, and I didn't price them affordably because I really didn't want to do subscriptions.
Yeah.
But by the time we finished, we had subscribers in 16 different states. Um,
Mhm.
we had, I had one lady, she said, I didn't see any copies of Two Lane Living in Fairmont this month. Well, we never delivered to Fairmont. But she had been getting her copies in Fairmont for over a year. We don't know how. We don't know who took them there, and we don't know why they quit taking them there, right? But
Yeah.
we signed her up for a subscription. She was happy to have it. So we were running after the magazine from day one.
Mhm.
You know, it was ahead of us from the first print. I mean, we just tried to keep up with it
Yeah.
delivery wise. We had columnists that, please let me write from you,
Mhm.
for you. People I've, even to this day, I've never met.
Mhm.
Randy Bodkins is in the Eastern Panhandle. I've never met Randy in person. And he is the one that wrote about nature and had these wonderful nature photos. And
Mhm.
the closest he and I have ever come to meeting is I had gone on a trip up to ride the Durban Rocket, the train in the Durban Rocket, and I was
Mhm.
crossing the crosswalk, and this truck stopped. This red 1980s truck stopped and allowed me to go across the crosswalk. And I got home that day, and I got a message from Randy that said, "You weren't by any chance anywhere near the Durban Rocket this morning?" And I said, "Yeah, I was." And he was like, "I was in the red truck that let you cross on the crosswalk."
Isn't that
So he and
crazy?
I have still never met in person. We are still in contact. We still send Christmas cards to each other. So it was an amazing experience. I would even call it fun for the first 5 years, even
Mhm.
though competition was harsh. Um, Being a female business owner in a male dominated field
Right.
um, presented some challenges that I didn't expect. Um, at that time, everybody was saying print is dead, you got
Mhm.
to go online. And so I wasted a lot of time um, trying to go online for an audience that wasn't about being online,
Right.
people that enjoy print or didn't have
Mhm.
access to the internet. I mean, even today, Gilmer County only has 60% of the people who have access to the internet.
Yeah, and
Only
didn't you
six.
say before we started recording that you're on satellite? You've had to get satellite
I am on
to
satellite.
have
I mean, we still have Frontier, because what happens if we disconnect our Frontier internet or our phone, they don't have enough ports to service our community. So the minute that we give up those two services, there's somebody on a waiting list.
Mhm.
So if we give them up, we'll never get them back.
Right.
So, and there are times when, satellite, there's a storm or something happens and
Now
the
is
satellite
this
goes out. We can.
Starlink? Are you on Starlink?
No, I'm on the waiting list for Starlink.
Okay.
We are with Viasat. Um,
Okay.
we considered HughesNet, did not go with HughesNet. We went with Viasat. I love it, love it, love it, love it. Um, I pay for the highest membership because again,
Mhm.
we don't have cable or
Right.
television. We stream our news and all that. So I pay for it, but it's reliable to us most of the time. And it had gotten that the problem with Tulane Living when it came to the end of 10 years, it had grown too big for us, one. And when I was the first person to get Frontier Broadband in Stumptown, West Virginia, where I am.
Mhm.
The minute they set it up, the guy called me from the substation and he said, "Do you want the service?" And I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, heck yeah, because you
But
were
by
driving out to another to take you were taking your disc out to have it, um,
I was
printed to
driving
the
out, yeah,
and people
and then
there's people who don't realize, and one of the things with especially with the podcast that I'm trying to reach people across, the country and the world really because, it goes everywhere, is that in places in West Virginia, it's still very, very, um, underserved by technology. I
yeah,
mean, we're still struggling for in your case, to even have reliable telephone. I mean, the telephone's been out what, 120
yeah.
some years, and you guys can't hardly get telephone out
Oh
there. So
gosh,
yeah.
right.
So yeah.
Well, that was it. It began to just have technical issues. So, for example, when I first got Frontier Internet, that would allow me to upload the document to the printer in Parkersburg.
Hmm.
But 5 or 6 years in, Frontier had oversold their
Hmm.
internet service in our area. And there was a 5-minute timeout on FTP connections.
FTPs.
So
Wow. Yeah.
then, yeah, so then I was having to break a 24-page paper. I was having to break it down into 4 pages at a time to send it to the printer before the timeout. So we had to get the satellite internet.
Hmm.
So that expense went up. We had a year when gas went over $4 a gallon.
Right.
We had some, dirty business attacks where, other competing people kind of undermined what we were
Hmm.
doing. Then, I went to our website got hacked. I had to change servers. My layout program was PageMaker and it wouldn't go
Yes.
into Windows,
Yes. The new stuff.
whatever
Yeah.
it was at the time.
Yeah.
So at 10 years, we had a core advertising base. We were losing some of it to the internet. Um, Everything that I had online was becoming outdated and insecure. My layout program, my photo programs were
Mhm.
outdated, would not allow the upgrades. And at that time, I had been working from home for the most part. I mean, I did a stint 1 year as an AmeriCorps volunteer, but for the most part, I had been working from home for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was starting to get a little, I don't want to say antisocial. Maybe I was losing my social graces, is what I would
Mhm.
say. And my mom and I went on this big bus trip out west on a senior
I
bus.
remember seeing stories about that.
And I think it's healthy when you are reminded that you live in a small space and the world is a big world. It's a
Mhm.
world full of opportunity. It's a world full of beauty. I think living in a small community sometimes you make your small community your whole world.
Mhm.
And it's limiting. So when I came back from my trip out west, I had decided I was going to get my master's degree. I had a scholarship from my time in AmeriCorps. I had a semester's worth of income in my savings. And I really was just going to go until my scholarships were up. I wasn't going to finish because I did not want to go into major, college debt. But
Mhm.
West Virginia Wesleyan and the MFA program there was kind of awesome because they let me trade advertising and two-lane living for my room and board.
Mm.
And at that time, I thought, well, I'll get the MFA and I'll finish. I still had a good portion of debt, but half of what I would have had. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be a college professor. I'm going to go into academia. I'm going to be. Um, and so I went back into the classroom and loved it, loved it, loved it. Adjuncts are academic slaves. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and put that out there. We're
You're
not
allowed.
paid. You know, and the truth of the matter is, we basically pay them for the privilege of teaching.
Yeah.
Um, so, but I loved it. I loved it, loved it, loved it. And I liked being out of the house, and I saw this little job posting for a part-time clerk at our public library. And I thought, okay, 21 hours a week. I can teach two classes at the college. I can, you know, be social at the library, for, you know, 21 hours a week.
Get some
Um,
grown-up conversation.
yeah, and I can, reemerge into the world and stop being a hermit and a recluse, and I loved it. And I did. I loved it. I loved going to work every day. I loved going into the classroom every day. Um, without two-lane living in our life, I had control of my life again, because for 10 years our whole lives were operated by deadline and delivery.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, we delivered Thanksgiving week. We delivered Christmas week.
Mhm.
I mean, in 10 years, every month, we were beholden to this thing that we created that outgrew us. And again, I loved it for the first 5 years. The second 5 years, I had great respect for it and I appreciated it, but it had become a bit of a burden on us.
Mhm.
Um, because Frank's older than I am, and we're not spring chickens. And I was getting to a point where I wanted to focus on the garden and I wanted to do other things.
Right.
I'm one of those
Right.
people. I've been at the library almost 6 years now. That's the longest I've ever been anywhere. Um, for my time frame's 4 years typically, and then I go,
Mhm.
okay, eh, I've done this,
I'm
and I'm
bored.
a fixer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm bored, but I'm a fixer. I go in and I fix things, and when it's fixed, I'm like, okay, I got to find something else to fix, right? The first time they offered me the director's position at Gilmer Public Library, I turned it down. We were still doing two-lane living. I was loving the classroom. I really I knew if I took the director's position, I would not there would come a point where I would not love to go into work anymore.
Mhm.
So the first time they asked me, I said no. 14 months later, it came back into my lap because of some inappropriate money management by the person they did hire. So I promised them I would take the job to fix the problem.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing with the library is it took a very short time for us to overcome that budget challenge.
Mhm.
Um, within a year, we were back on track. We were out of the red, back in the black. We were growing our programs. We were growing everything, and then COVID.
Mhm.
So I had a budget problem I had to fix, and I fixed it. But then I inherited the COVID
Right.
year,
Yeah.
um, which I mean, you can't fix that. You just
No,
do
you
the best
just
you can.
you work through it. Yeah.
My board and I established that our priorities were keeping our staff safe, A, keeping our staff safe, keeping our services available to the public while keeping staff and public safe.
Mhm.
We were the first library in the state to reopen after quarantine, simply because I was going in regularly. We had other projects going on. We had a patio, memorial patio built. We had some other things going on and there were people in our community who could not apply for their unemployment because their cell phones wouldn't work with the unemployment website.
Yeah.
And I came in one day to work on the patio construction, and there was a guy on the front porch, so frustrated. He was in tears. And I just opened up and said, okay, go in, use the computer, talk to my board members, talk to my staff, and said, okay, we're going to do a full desanitize top to bottom over the next 2 weeks, and we're reopening.
Mhm.
Um, so then we managed that. So then we came into recovery year. The recovery from the embezzlement didn't bother me. Making it through COVID was stressful and emotional and scary for me and my whole staff,
Mhm.
but we made it through it. Recovery year was difficult. When a large windfall of money lands in a small community, um, there are people who are in leadership and they're elected to be in leadership. Um, they feel they know what the community needs, and they feel they know what's best.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a scramble for everybody to get money, and I just, there was a lot of politics that year, and it really just kind of deflated me. I didn't see the support for the public library in the community that I had imagined was there. I didn't see any reason why it should be become political. I mean,
Mhm.
it was recovery funds, organizations were entitled to them. So and at the same time in recovery year, you know this, that my mom had some health issues, and I needed to
Yes.
be
Yes.
with my mother
Mhm.
a good portion of time. So, and at that time, already I had a column that would appear in the Glenville Democrat Pathfinder and on the Her Herald. Well, at that time, the Her Herald quit updating. They had been a source of historical knowledge, ancestry news in Central West Virginia area for years.
Mhm.
And Bob and Diane were just getting old. After 2020, there was a lot more anger. They were receiving more death threats. They were receiving less funding report as, life got more challenging financially for communities. So during that year of recovery and time with my mom, I lost my venue of the Her Herald as an outlet as a writer.
Mhm.
And I began to have moral issues with our local newspaper and the way they were managing coverage. So I quit submitting to the local newspaper because I did not want my writing associated. And I lost the Her Herald. And I wanted to write again. After
Mhm.
my master's degree, I was burnt out on writing, and I didn't write for over a year almost.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I did, it was very clunky and mechanical. I just
Mhm.
didn't have my flow. And when I finally got it back, I had no audience.
Mhm.
Who's going to read it? My 50 Facebook followers.
I was one. I
So
was reading
I
it.
know. And at that time, I had um, read somebody's stuff on Substack,
Mhm.
And this kind of goes into where was I 20 years ago? When I checked out Substack, I was like, this makes everything so easy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't have to build this. I don't have to learn this. I don't have to have this add on. I don't have to, compared to
Yeah.
what we had 20 years ago to publish online,
Mhm.
the platform made it super, super easy. And
Yeah.
I still had, you know, I have trouble parting with things. I won't call myself a hoarder. Um, I would call myself a collector of perhaps some unnecessary items. But I
They're
had
still good.
never,
They're still good. They
yeah,
count. It's not trash.
right. I had never let go of the Two Lane Living domain name
Right.
because of the challenges of being online back then. None of our archives were available online.
Mhm.
Um, I still had my email list
Mhm.
from our Two Lane Living folks who wanted to be messaged when things were available or when they. So I still had all these fragments from Two Lane Renaissance or Two Lane Living.
Mhm.
And I personally, after 2020, um, with the election and the pandemic and the politics of recovery year, all of that, I personally needed a renaissance.
Mhm.
I needed to say um, the libraries, public libraries, are important, whether current leadership sees it that way or not.
Mhm.
I had to believe that our small town community um, can make a comeback. I see it happening in a neighboring county, Calhoun,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I see fragments of it in Gilmer. So I felt that I needed a personal renaissance. My writing needed a renaissance, and our community needs a renaissance. And the things that go with that are things, it's the same thing as when I did Two Lane Living. I want to learn about um, finding peace in my soul.
Mhm.
I want to learn about putting my burdens on off my shoulders, right? I want to remind myself that the the more simplicity I have in my life, the easier it is to manage, the better I'm doing. I want to get back into my gardening, which I gave up when I became the director of the library. Just
Yeah. You
can't
just
do a big
yeah.
garden and can tomatoes for a month, when you're working a full-time
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back to the spirit of Two Lane Living, but I did not want to go back to print. And
Yeah.
I love print. I value print. And Two Lane Living was a business that, again, we had to make so much money a month in advertising or subscriptions or some
Mhm.
way to pay for it.
Right.
Um, when I recreated Two Lane Renaissance at twolaneliving.com on the Substack platform, it really was just me as a writer um, saying, "Hey, I need my audience.
Mhm.
I need an audience." Um, a lot of writers say, "Okay, I need to write. Um, I have to be read." It's a background in journalism, and
Mhm.
I've been writing off and on for our community here. I think going on 15 years now in one
Yeah.
publication or one
And
format or
you
another.
actually, and to skip backwards just a tad, you were
Hmm.
awarded you were awarded the West Virginia Librarian of the Year, were you not?
I was
Yeah.
for 2022, which was
Yeah.
such a such an achievement for me. But then I would turn around locally and could not garner the financial support I felt we
Yeah.
needed for our recovery from the pandemic.
Which
So
is
I felt,
which is similar to the prophet not being recognized in his own community. Is that at the state level, the organization recognizes everything you achieved. Like you said, you were the first to reopen after the COVID. You implemented so many unique things there in that little tiny community library to help your community at a time when, all around them everything is falling apart. And then yet I'm going to offer that the jealousy of those that were looking at you making these strides and doing these things in spite of, and you're getting recognized. And so, they're saying, well, we'll show you, we won't fund you, we'll make it hard for you. Who does she think and that comes back around to who does she think she is? You have really achieved a lot of, even if it's not in awards category, which you have also with your writing in West Virginia Writers and stuff. Um, you have done some great things, even if you feel that you haven't. You have really achieved a lot of things.
well, again, I when I see a problem, um, if I can figure a solution or I can find a way to not have that problem anymore, it's in my nature to fix it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and I see potential and I see opportunity. And again, I'm not sure that I fault our leadership because when I mean, even though our local city got $3.5 million, the community need surpasses that by
Hmm.
far. I mean, we need
Hmm.
new sewer systems in Gilmer, Glenville, we need
Yeah.
new water.
That's
We got
that's
problems,
legacy
right?
issues there. Yeah.
Right. So, I understand why our leaders felt a great need for infrastructure. I get it. However, when I see that the public library, the health department, the senior center, the recreation center, which we had even turned into an extra quarantine spot if
Hmm.
needed to be. When I see that these organizations, by the way, all women run organizations,
Hmm.
um, who were all frontline people for the community, as far as I'm concerned, during the pandemic. When I saw that none of us got our full reimbursement requests, when I saw that, all these people who had done their very, very best to serve well during the pandemic, um, being set aside for a problem with infrastructure, which again, infrastructure is important.
Right.
Um, but infrastructure funding can come from other places. Recovery funding for these organizations could only come from recovery funds. So even to do infrastructure issues in Glenville, 3.5 million is a drop in the bucket. They've still had to go and request 4 or 5 other million. And there were
Hmm.
things that I felt were unnecessary. Like, do we really need $45,000 worth of recording cameras in a traffic circle instead of reimbursing the senior center, the rec center, the health department, the library for their losses? It's the difference between, in many ways, I think it's the difference between economic development mindset and a community development mindset.
Hmm.
Um, One of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of people don't understand, in order to have economic development, it must follow community development. Um, if you have economic growth without community development and community growth, you don't have the support to carry and maintain that economic growth.
Right.
So I think sometimes social services, which I consider the library part social service, part educational service,
Mhm.
part information. Social services don't really get the respect they need because everybody's about economic development.
Mhm.
But a lot of those social services, um, they have to be there first. You
Mhm.
have to have a skilled workforce. You have to have an educated
Oh,
workforce.
yes.
You have to have an
Yes, you do.
involved workforce.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, I think that the focus was a lot on, what can we do for economic development in the future, and
I
not on
agree.
how can we help those recover from the
Right,
pandemic.
and I agree, and when I while you were going through some of those things, I was working with the Chemical Alliance Zone, and they are an economic development based organization, and one of the things that you often heard, which is kind of oh, stereotypical, is that uh, the workforce that's there are can't pass drug test. And if you can't get your community, if your people off the drugs, they can't go to work. I mean, if you've got to have, you can't have one without the other. You've got to work to get them off the drugs. You've got to get them educated. I know they put a lot of money into some training programs for the chemical plant manager programs, but they still didn't have people who could pass the drug test. And then, if they could pass the drug test, did they have the education background or education level to be able to step into these jobs? And it was the 11 years that I was with them. It was really a challenge that I saw all the time. But I agree. If they would have focused a little more um, towards the community development, because you can't just drop and they're finding that out with one of those parks down at the tri-state area, where they thought this was going to be this wonderful industrial park. We've got the river, we got the rail, we got the airlines and everything right here. It'll be great, and it's just fell apart. That nobody's interested in it.
Yeah, I think the other
So,
thing the other thing that I folks didn't think of, especially for senior center, rec center, library, health
mhm,
department, all these people are chronically underpaid.
sure.
So when the pandemic ended and it was time for everybody to go back to work, a lot of people, and without blame, because I had a similar epiphany, during
Hmm.
quarantine.
Sure.
Um, you know, a lot of people had a change in value. They
Yeah.
would rather take care of their own children than have a
Hmm.
job and send them to daycare. They would
Hmm.
rather have a garden than bust their butt to pay for spaghetti sauce that's prices are going off the charts.
Oh, yeah.
So the other issue I think that happened in recovery was that, and again, it's community development and economic development. One of the first things our library did was provide raises because people didn't want to come back to work.
Hmm.
People could see that in many ways working was just rolling them through money, not really
Hmm.
making them money. So that was the other thing that, kind of upset me about not getting the recovery funds that I thought we were entitled to and still believe we were entitled to, was that, you know, I know that my staff, for the most part, spends their money in the community.
Hmm.
I know that Frank and I, for the most part, try to spend our money in the community. Now, I am an online shopper, but that's because I'm not going to drive an hour and a half,
Yeah, that
you
gets
know,
to an
to,
economics level that's, yeah.
right. But giving our employees, giving our staff raises, um, was a way to make sure they didn't jump ship. B, make sure we also gave them a one-time cost of living increase. Make sure that they survive inflation. Make
Mhm.
sure, that they, that even when we hired, that we could hire quality employees. So again, it's that community development versus economic development. And
Mhm.
the thing with two lane Renaissance is, I've never really been motivated by money. Now, of course, I like money and I like spending money and I
Mm,
like
most
having
of us do.
money and feeling secure. But I'm not motivated by money. I'm motivated by a desire to learn, to teach, and to help others. So with Two Lane Renaissance this time around, it's not about income. It's not a
Mhm.
business. I want it to be a love. I don't ever want to come to a point where I hate it,
Mhm.
um, or it becomes a burden, as it did
Right.
with the print edition of Two Lane Living. But I
Mhm.
want to be able to empower others as I empower myself. I want to share what I learn. I want to have different views presented, views that you provide, that we have Elaine who is all about organic, foods and importance of
Mhm.
nutrition, and then revisit our archives because in
Mhm.
10 years of Two Lane Living, we truly had some amazing contributors. I mean,
Mhm.
people who really knew their stuff. And you know this, none of our columnists were paid. They did
Right.
it for a love, right?
Mhm.
They loved it. They
Mhm.
shared what they knew because they had a passion and they cared about their topic. And that for me was the best of Two Lane Living. Not just me writing and having audience and how many people we reached, but
Sure.
the people that I got to work with, the columnists that we were able to empower, the people that we were able to empower. There were a lot of people. We had Judy Wolfram who wrote Waste Not, Want Not. There were a
Mhm.
lot of people who told me, that helped me save money.
Sure, yeah.
Or like we even had household tips, and there were all kinds of people who were like, I didn't know lemon juice could do that. I didn't know
Yeah.
peroxide could do that.
Yeah.
So my goal is to do that again. And it does trouble me that we're doing it online and there are print readers that we won't be able to reach. But, and I don't ever want to say print is dying because I believe print has a place.
I do too. I because we know, with the, it's so easy for things on the digital storage systems just to disappear. I mean, how many when we talked about this a little bit, how many different PCs, laptops, towers, hard drives, USBs have we had over the years? And every time I knew how
I
much
have
stuff do how much stuff do you have up on the cloud that you might or might not ever be able to access again if that particular company goes bankrupt or I mean, I've got stuff scattered in so many
I
places.
never
It's just
store
crazy.
I have I have external drives or
Mhm,
thumb drives
mhm,
on all my computers.
mhm.
And very rarely do I store anything on an internal drive. And I don't use the cloud. I'm not, I mean,
I've
I
got so
use
much
Google
backup there.
platforms, right? But I don't use the cloud. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, I had a camera with a floppy disk.
Mhm,
I still have all my photos on floppy disks. And so
mhm.
when I had a desktop custom built for me, I said, I need a floppy disk drive. And the guy
Yeah,
looked at me like I had lost
yeah,
my
yeah.
mind. And I'm like, I need that because
Your
I
stuff's
have
still there.
like 8 years of photos that are
And
on
it's
floppy
getting to be
drive.
the same
I don't
way
even use
with the
internal.
CD. The CD-ROM is getting to be the
Yeah.
same way. I mean, the father-in-law made sure that because I still have stuff on CD-ROMs, and, um but the world is trending away from all that. But I believe that it's going to come to a hard realization that that is so ephemeral. You got to come back to the solid, I can touch it, tactile, book, printed, real stuff. Because the digital world is, yeah, it can hold a lot more, and you've got everything at your fingertips, but it's just, uh, the conspiracy theorists would say it's one EMP away from, being wiped out forever. So I don't.
And
I'm not
it
necessarily
is.
promoting that idea. I'm not necessarily promoting that idea. I'm just saying that there is still yet a place for uh, actual physical hardcover and softcover books and printed materials. I still believe that it's taken a
I do
hit.
too.
You know.
But I've played in print. And again, I still do my creative work in print. I still have my
Hmm.
books.
Hmm.
But um, I've never really focused and played on with media. I mean, you know this.
Hmm.
This is my first time ever being in a podcast that's public broadcast. Um, you know, I had to like go do my hair and my makeup and
And we're
everything
not
for the
live because
video.
I gave you that option. We're not
And I
live streaming so
yeah,
that you'd feel a little more
you gave
comfortable
yeah,
with it.
so there are new tools that I haven't played with. I want
Mhm.
to do audio, I want to do video. I mean, I did private video. I did one-on-one student tutoring, but I've never done public, and you inviting me here today has really kind of gotten me over this mental
Well, we're
block I have
still,
about this
yeah,
media.
until I hit upload, it's still not quite public, but it's because it's not like the live streaming that you've seen me do before, where it's just, there's no going back, there's no do over. I can't go and trim this out, So, and
Right.
I struggle with that too. I am bad, and I'm not perfect by any means, but I struggle with the perfect getting in the way of the good, and thinking I haven't mastered this whatever it is yet, so I can't move, and I'm stuck here because now I don't have time to learn it all, and so
Mhm.
yesterday evening, I did live stream with Tim Toolman, um, uh, and his wife, and they're Canadians, and I have never met them, but I've started following him on YouTube, and I'll have YouTube playing in my. I've got the headband with the Bluetooth speakers in them, and I pair that up with my Kindle, and I stream the YouTubes up when I'm doing all the stuff here at the house. And kind of, he often would say, if you want to interview with me or whatever. And I thought, I'm gonna take this chance. I'm gonna do this. So I reached out to him. He said, sure, heck yeah. Took a little while to pare down the date, and I was a little uncomfortable just asking him. So I said, your wife, I'd like to have your wife there too, because I'd like to see her perspective. And it ended up being very good, but it went 2 hours. But it was live for 2 hours. So I'm sitting there live, and nobody's really watching. I think there was 4 or 5 people. I don't have that much of a following at this point, but that's okay. I'm still learning it. Maybe I won't do it very long, but I've got like, this will be probably the 16th, I think the 16th podcast once I get it loaded up, and um, it's been fun. I'm getting a little bit of reaction from people, but it's been an interesting learn, and trying to reach people that are potential client or guests for the B&B. So,
Mhm.
but before I get too off in the weeds with myself, you've got some books out that I wanted you to mention, and you just had a. How did your
Oh,
thing go Saturday? Didn't you have a community event where you had your book signing and stuff?
my first community event. Apparently, this is
Yeah,
a
heck,
week a month for first
for
or something.
first, yeah.
I felt I did pretty well. I did sell. I have multiple books. My two main books that I promote is Life in the Slow Lane, and
Mhm.
that is where I went through 10 years of my writing in Two-Lane Living magazine, and I picked my favorites. And I'm not the only columnist that did that. Sherry Brake has done that. Max Samples has done that. I've got some people that are working on theirs now. Russ Richardson started with his columns and has a, he's working now on a trilogy of his life in the forest. So that's a revisit of my favorite two-lane living columns. And you know I, that one did very well at the sale. There were a lot of people that wanted to do that for Christmas gifts because they remember the magazine
Yeah.
fondly, and have folks who maybe missed the magazine or never saw it or
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
The other book that I have, which is dear to my heart, I self-published through Lulu, and it's a little pocket book. I should have had them ready for you, but
Oh,
it's
that's
like
okay.
this big.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's like this big. It literally will fit in your back pocket.
Mhm.
And there are just a few essays in there. These essays were part of my thesis work, my master's degree work, and they had been accepted to online literary magazines.
Mhm.
But they're so dear to my heart, and during my MFA and my graduate work, I was focusing on empathy. How do you create empathy for dark characters? How do you create empathy in your reader's mind? How do you cover difficult topics with empathy? So the name of my little pocketbook is just simply called Essays on Empathy.
Mhm.
You can go to my lhayesminney.net website, or you can go to Lulu and type my name in. And Life in the Sloan Lane is available on Barnes and Noble. It's available on Amazon. Of course, I get very little money if
Yeah.
they are sold that route.
Yeah.
I make good
Amazon is a
money if
nightmare these days.
I make more money if they're sold from Lulu. But my
Mhm.
little pocketbook is a size that Barnes and Noble and Amazon won't accept.
Oh.
So it doesn't have an ISBN number. It's just a little
Mhm.
pocketbook that you can only get through me personally or through Lulu or my website.
Mhm.
I like um I like that size. And there's um there's a little publication called it's put out by Creative Nonfiction Magazine, and it's one little essay that comes in a pocketbook. It was suspended during COVID and the pandemic. It's going to come back out. But I loved that because I could stick it in my little pocket in my purse. I could stick it in my
Mhm.
back pocket. And it was more mobile than, and my purse is not big enough for a regular sized book. It only has, but I always have to have reading material with me.
Mine's big enough for a regular size encyclopedia set.
Oh my gosh, no, I can't
I
do
have a
that.
bag. I don't have a purse, I have a bag I carry.
So I do, I have written other books. I've written other books about spirituality. I
Mhm.
have a book. Um, it's a little trippy. It's about reading people's minds, but all of that is science. It's not
Mhm.
magic. It's science,
Mhm.
right? It's nonverbal communication. It's
Right.
micro expressions. It's what generation are they? What year were they born? That
Mhm.
kind of stuff. So it's presented as like
It
how to be psychic,
yeah, kind
but
of
it
Sherlock
really
Holmes-y.
is. Yeah, it really is. That's I call it simply psychic. Um,
Mm.
but maybe I should have named it scientifically psychic or something like that. And that was something that I did originally. What I did when I worked at Hampton Ridge Magic, and here we go all the way back to 20 years ago.
Yeah.
When I worked for them, magic books were the magic trick books that were available in the late 90s were from mimeograph.
Oh, yeah, I remember
I
Mimograph.
mean, okay, for
Yeah.
you youngins, go Google it, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So
I don't even know if Google goes back that far.
the other thing, right? So even then, I was taking things that were no longer copyrighted or with permission, and we were taking these old black and white plastic spiral bound mimeographed books and turning them into updating them and turning them into modern presentation, full color cover,
Mhm.
nice font type thing. And when they moved to Chicago, I didn't get rid of my files. I still had my files. And of course, when that book, it was originally called Pyrotechnics or Psychotechnics, or so, I don't even remember. But when that was originally written, micro expressions weren't a commonly known thing.
Mhm.
Part of nonverbal communication requires empathy. You
Mhm.
have to be able to look at a person and read them as well as hear them.
Mhm.
So some of them, that one was just for fun. We were in quarantine. I was sorting through my file cabinets. I came across that one and I was like, "Ooh, I bet that could be updated and brought to newfangled." Because again, even if you wanted to be presenting as a psychic and you wanted to market yourself as a psychic, it was like go hang doorknob tags on their doors.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it was so
Guerrilla marketing.
pre-internet that yeah, it was just it was so outdated. I really just wanted to bring that one up to date. So again, I have multiple books, but the two that I think are most appropriate for a wide audience are the is Life in the Slow Lane, and then my little essays on empathy. That little pocketbook. I just love that little book, and I should probably redo the cover because all my covers were created with a cover designer that Lulu provides,
Okay.
but they recently updated their cover designer. But I've been using Lulu, oh wow, since oof, possibly since you and I first encountered each other. My
I
first
I
book that I did on
remember
there.
I remember reading about Lulu back in the early 2000s, and I did a book on, Think Outside the Office, and I went with Outskirt Press at the time, and,
I remember
instead of
them.
Lulu. So I think they're
Well,
still
I
out there, but
had
I've never done anything like that since.
my first book that I did with Lulu. Again, I have to redo it now. It's been up there so old and I've taken it down. It was a picture book for Audra State Park.
Mhm.
Frank and I used to go to Audra State Park all the time, and we would go winter, spring, summer, fall. Audra is the
Mhm.
first to open up in the season and the last to close, um, campground wise, but you can again still go hike there or whatever in the winter. So
Mhm.
between the two of us, we had several floppy disks full of photography that we had taken on our visits to Audra State Park. And I love Audra. It's so beautiful there. Um, and so, I mean, years ago, I'm thinking probably early 2000s,
Mhm.
I did a photo book of Audra State Park. And that's probably the first one that I did through Lulu. Now, the very first book I published in sixth grade. Um, I typed it up on my mother's manual typewriter on
Mhm.
onion skin paper,
Yes, I remember.
and I illustrated it myself with pencils and crayons. I sewed the binding on my mother's sewing machine, and I made a cardboard cover that I covered with feed sack fabric, um, red feed sack fabric with white polka dots, and then I took stencils and put the title on the front. So, I mean, you know, I've just been doing what I do
Yeah.
since I was a kid.
Since you were a
And
good
now
walk.
I've got like, 9 typewriters in my house that I'm doing, typewriter
I will,
poetry and all that kind of other stuff.
on a little dog leg or rabbit hole or rabbit trail or whatever you call it at this point, I will blame you for several little, um several
And
little
back at you.
investings.
I already know.
Yeah. Because you did the thing with the typewriters. I'm like, "Oh my god, I love those typewriters." So I have like 3. I didn't nowhere near like you do, but we have 3, and we have one that was my husband's father's when he was in high school, but
Oh, nice.
it's like a 1918, 1920 typewriter, but when my father-in-law was in high school, he bought it used, so it wasn't like new in the family. And we took it
Right.
to, I wanna say Cincinnati, to a guy out in Cincinnati and had it as refurbished as could be done with it. It was in pretty rough shape, but, um, and so we've got it out on a table on a little, um, area that I have some other period things like that in the here in the breakfast room, and then I have a couple of manuals downstairs that the husband doesn't know about that I got, and they come in when he wasn't here. He was out of state at different times, and they come in. And then there's something else. Like there was a couple other uh, little hobbies I dived in for short periods of time because I'm like, look what Lisa's doing. Oh, I want to do that, you know. So,
Well,
and
you've done the
actually,
same thing to
Substack's one of them.
me.
Substack's one of them. I thought,
Well,
"What is Substack?
that
What is
was
that? Oh, I gotta know what this is." So, yeah.
I had to see that too, and I think it was what is it? Black by God. Crystal Good does her Black by God magazine on
Mm,
Substack. I think originally she did, and then I think quarterly she does a print version of it. But there
mhm,
are several West Virginia endeavors happening on Substack. Ones that I follow that are either citizens journalism or I follow one that she talks about dealing with um, your own insecurities
mhm,
or the imposter syndrome or things like that.
right.
So again, I simply saw other people doing it and I was like, ooh,
Yeah,
what Substack? Because again,
yeah,
I love
yeah,
WordPress. Started
yeah.
designing on front page,
I
but
use the
then,
front
and I
page a
love
little, not
WordPress, but
much.
Substack makes it so
They
easy,
do, and the
so
shame
easy.
of it is that, I've got, like, I've got the personal website, and I've got to put up the I've been using a subdomain on my website for direct books for the B&B, but I need to off that onto its own, and I've got the domain, I just haven't built the site yet. But the the sad part about that is as you build your website to have your blog to drive the traffic to your website to, for all of that. And when you're doing Substack, you're absolutely, you've got people far and away from unless, and then you try to drive them back to you. And so that's, I love the idea of Substack. It really is that simple, but and it beats having to log in behind and trying to upload a blog post and all that nonsense. But it takes you away from, you know. So I can publish all this stuff and set it up to be published on Substack, which really I should be putting on my own website blog. You know.
I get that. I think about that too because the purpose of all of it is really to typical marketing is to
Hmm.
funnel people to your website.
Right.
Now, I have the same issue with social media. I
Yeah.
don't want people following my personal Facebook profile. I want them to follow my author profile, but my
Right.
author profile is there to send them to either my Substack or my website.
Hmm.
But I believe, and again, this is my personal preference. I I like receiving things in my email that I can leave in that inbox and access whenever I have time or
Right.
inclination or mindset. Now on social media, if you don't check it every day or if you might miss something or you might,
Hmm.
if you saw it today, Facebook makes it hard to go back and find it
Yeah,
5 days from now because you already
some of the
saw
big
it
ones,
and they don't
yes,
show it.
if you don't save it for watch later and then have that big list. Yeah, some of the big social media a are just getting, uh, too big for their britches. I mean, they're just, what started out as great fun ways to connect or reconnect and to share stuff has now become a place where you're hesitant to even tell somebody you disagree with them. So
Right.
it's just getting crazy. And I don't have so much going on over at YouTube that I worry about it, but I'm seeing people get, and I'm not monetized there anyway. I don't have enough of anything to do but I'm seeing people get, um, demonetized, or they're getting, um, slowed down, and hidden and stuff because they have a different opinion of something. And it's just I see this, whatever it has become, it's getting ready to crumble back down on itself. And I don't know where people go from there to stay connected, because we're so personally, human to human, disconnected now. It's all about, if you're sitting here playing on your phone, it's all about, um, sitting in Wayne and I will be sitting in the living room watching. Well, we're not really watching television, but the television's on, the dogs are asleep, and he's over here doing this on his phone, and I'm over here doing this on my phone, and I might say, "Oh, it's going to rain tomorrow." Yeah, I got to get whatever done. But we've lost that. And I don't know. I don't know what's about to happen, but it can't be good. And I don't mean like revolution. I don't mean anything like that. But as far as society, we don't talk to each. We don't look people in the eye anymore. We don't know how to have conversation anymore. And it's just getting insane. And I'm with you. I've got so many people that follow that are friends of mine on Facebook, on my personal page. I don't talk to them. I don't know most of them. It prompts you to say happy birthday, and that's about the only time I talk to most of them. And
Well,
I know you've
you
whittled
know
yours
this.
down several times, and I admire that, because I'm not really sure where to whittle mine. I don't have the author page to shoot people to, but um, I've whittled
Well,
my
and a lot
list
of
down.
people did not shift over to the author page. Now, of
Mhm.
course, when I stir a pot in the community, I have a lot of community people end up on my author page because my personal profile really doesn't have my
You're
first
locked
name
down,
in
yeah.
it.
Mhm,
And that's one reason with Two Lane Renaissance, when I begin doing podcasts and video and those things that make me feel like I'm personally exposing myself to
mhm,
ridicule or attack. That's why those are only for paid subscribers.
mhm,
Our free columns, our paid subscribers can comment.
mhm,
Nobody else can comment. In the things that take extra time, effort, and money, like video and audio, or special features, or ebooks, or online courses, I'm no longer willing to expose myself to trolls.
yeah,
Um, and one of the reasons why I trimmed down my personal profile is because so many of them were trolls
mhm,
or were simply watching what I would say so they could stir a pot somewhere else.
mhm.
And we talked about this a little bit before recording. I like to stir my own pots. I like to choose my own battles. I like to stir my own pot and wave my spoon around and let everybody.
Yeah,
So, but also newspaper reporter, I had a group of 7 stalkers. That you expose yourself to people.
mhm,
And I've grown old enough now and wise enough now, hopefully, to realize that not everybody is good for me.
mhm,
Not now, again, I don't want to just see a bunch of people who feel the same way I do, which is what
mhm.
Facebook typically begins to force on us. We only
Yeah,
see like-minded because of their
right.
algorithms. And I'm a
Mhm,
centrist. I'm not, I'm a
mhm,
registered independent. I'm not I'm not Republican, I'm not Democrat. So
Mhm.
I like to see, you know, both sides of a discussion. Um, and I think Facebook has taken that away from me because of their algorithms.
Yeah, they
But
do,
also, there
and
are people who, there's people who just want to be mean.
mhm, yeah,
And I think we need to
I
take
agree.
measures to protect ourselves from that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I won't, I'm not a centrist. I am a uh, center-leaning conservative, tending towards libertarianism in a lot of areas. I was registered Republican for a long time, ran for House. You probably, I think we were
I know
connected
that.
when
Hmm.
I did that, and I obviously I didn't get elected, which is fine because of the way things worked out. Anyway, it was the best thing to happen. My mother started getting ill, and I needed to be there for her. But I like to have discussion with people I disagree with, and I like to be able to disagree with people without having to worry about them coming with at me with a knife. You know, so
And
I like
you and I have had disagreements. There have
we
been
do we do.
places
There's
where we
several areas.
knew,
Yeah, yeah. There's
yeah,
several areas
where
where
we
you and I are on
knew,
totally opposites. Yeah, and
but
uh,
again, it's not a problem for us. We
right,
can
right.
civilly
And
discuss.
and that comes back around to the kids that can't get off of these things is they don't know how to have and they don't teach it uh discussion, without
Right.
getting angry, without, they don't have debate classes. They don't teach people how to disagree without being disagreeable. And we've got a couple generations now of kids who were raised watching their parents fight out on the little league field, you know, because little Johnny didn't get to play enough in the football game, and their parents are mad at the coach. They're gonna beat up the coach. I mean, but you know,
Yeah.
what if we? So I'm hoping that we're getting ready to see a change there in that we can get back to I don't know what it's going to take for that to happen, for the nation to come back around and say, okay, just because we don't agree doesn't mean we get to bomb each other, or what was it down in was it North Carolina where somebody just took shots at the and took down the electric stations, power stations. They shot them up, and now these people don't have any. Like, but that is the dumbest crap. I don't care what you believe. You don't do stuff like that. That's just you just don't do it. You know. So I don't agree with that kind of just off the chart behavior. But
And why? To
yeah,
what
what purpose
extent?
does it?
To what
Yeah,
purpose? What purpose does that have?
I won't
And
be
I,
surprised if we find out that that person was not directly related to anything other than they were off their meds. I mean,
right.
just or persons plural, because I think it happened. Didn't it happen in uh more than one spot? It wasn't just one of the stations. They I was
Hmm.
thinking it was two or three. But I don't know.
Well, you
Anyway,
had
go
mentioned
ahead.
you had mentioned not a revolution, and there was a point um, when I was kind of a conspiracy theorist prepper. We need a revolution kind of
Hmm.
person, okay?
Hmm.
But what I've come to believe is that we are primed and we are ready for a renaissance. Now, what's the difference between a revolution and a renaissance? A revolution destroys everything and wants to start again from scratch.
Hmm.
A renaissance takes what's broken and not working
Hmm.
and reworks it to be better.
Right.
So
I
again,
agree.
it's the difference between, anarchy and hope. It's
Yeah.
the difference between saying burn the house down or remodel.
Yeah.
And that's why I chose two-lane Renaissance, and I chose Renaissance as intentionally
Hmm.
because I don't want to. That I have thought in my time. I have thought about leaving West Virginia. I have
Yeah.
thought about leaving Gilmer County. I have
Hmm.
thought about leaving the rural world.
Hmm.
Um, and those are all revolutionary personal motivations.
Hmm.
Um, I have a love for Calhoun next door and Gilmer. I've worked in
Mhm.
both and I
Yeah.
shop in both and I have friends in both. I see the people in Calhoun County taking what they have to work with and making it fantastic.
Right.
I see them working together, but Calhoun, doesn't have a college, they don't have a lot to work with, and yet
Mhm.
I see a renaissance happening in Calhoun County. They have more
Mhm.
shops and niche places in Calhoun than Glenville has anywhere, and we're a college town.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not anymore. I don't want to be a revolutionist. I want to
Yeah.
be a renaissance person. I want to see us take what's not working for us and make it work again.
Yeah. And it's perhaps the uh s- unfortunate strict definition people use of revolution, because you can change things without bloodshed and damage, and which is exactly what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, I remember, when you were, yeah, working your the homestead, and getting your chickens and getting your place set up, and everything. I remember all of that, and that a lot of that community that I'm and you know, where I'm at, you're in a very rural area, and I'm in kind of a suburb area, and I can only sort of mimic or mirror that type of, because I mean I'm in a little community here. I've got what 50 feet between me and the house next to me, so I have some space, but I don't have that kind of space. So I've always been
Let
kind of
me ask
jealous
you,
of. Mhm.
do you have a rooster?
I did have, I don't anymore. He had to go the way of the eternal flock when he flogged me and I had a big hole in my leg. So
That's
yeah,
why
I
I don't
don't
have
have.
roosters. But I was thinking for you, them going off at daybreak might upset
Yeah,
the neighbors.
actually, originally we had two, because when we got the chicks at the tractor store, as I call it, Tractor Supply, you don't know what they are. So we ended up with two
Right.
roosters, and one of them, I'm pretty sure, died from them fighting, because I knew they were fighting, that they were, flailing at each other and stuff, and then one of them was just dead one day in the yard. I'm like, this is probably, yeah. And then the other one,
Right.
once he got me, I'm like, no, we're not doing this, not doing this. But I do have a drake duck. I didn't originally have a
Okay.
drake, but neighbors of my dad's, a couple streets over, they got quite a few of them, between ducks and chickens. When the tractor supplying him all spring, oh, come and get the ducks and chickens. Well, the guy did that. They live on the river. He didn't build a very secure pen for them, and he goes out hearing all this noise, and the raccoons just decimating, just taking them out.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
he only ended up with two ducks that survived, and I got those because he said he just couldn't take care of them anymore, which he hadn't really taken
Well,
care of them to begin
I
with, because
tried
people don't think about that.
I tried ducks twice.
Hmm.
Because we got a lake out back, and
Yes,
it only makes
turtles
sense.
and. Mhm.
But between turtles and
Mhm.
raccoons,
Mhm.
both of them were very emotional, unsuccessful
Yeah,
experiences.
it can be
Even,
awful. I went
yes,
out, I don't know what got a hold of one of my chickens. I've had a just off and on. I mean, when you're at the level I'm in, you only have a handful of them. You lose one, it's a big part of your flock, if you wanna call it that. I went out to put them all in, one evening, and one was just weird in the yard, and they should have been inside the coop. And I looked, and she'd been attacked by something, and she didn't make it through the night. There wasn't anything I could do, but she didn't make it through the night. And it honestly, it looked to me like a hawk had got her. And my dad swears that a hawk could not have tried to pick her up, but she had puncture marks like a hawk would have, grabbed. But she was on the ground, and it may have been a raccoon. I don't know. I never did know what got it, but I had to tighten up, how soon I ran them back in, and I had to tighten up the fence a little bit. She Whatever got her while they were out in the yard, and it was
hmm
at dusk. So I tightened down, what time I put them in, and I've been pretty strict about that ever since. I mean, I'm almost anal about it because I don't want anything getting them. But I've got the coop I've got them in is a Rubbermaid building, and so nothing's getting in unless it's going through the doors, the little
Right.
pet doors that I put in there. And those go down, and they get mashed down pretty hard, and at night. So there's unless something knows how to lift those up, they're not going to be able to figure that out. And then the run that they get in, it's not all that secure, but they're not in it. Like, I don't let them out until about an hour after sunup. They get I run them
Mm.
in about half an hour before sundown or so, and I've been pretty good with that. But I don't have that many, and I've never bred to have babies, so I haven't had anything tried to eat any of the babies. When I've gotten uh, chicks, I kept them in my basement in a dog crate, until they were big enough to go outside. So that's an experience having chickens in your basement. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it can it can
Yeah, I
be it can
wanted
be a challenge.
ducks. I wanted ducks, but we just couldn't. I mean, with great effort, we just
Hmm.
couldn't keep them
You have
safe.
to
Just
you
couldn't do
have
it.
to do them. In my of course, I don't have a lake, so I didn't have to worry about anything like, you know, uh, mink or turtles or anything getting them. But um, my my ducks I treat exactly like the chickens, and I actually in the summer especially I have to go out and round them up to make them go because they want to stay out later. They go in the same coop that the chickens go in. They're in the same run the chickens are in. So if I'm not going to be home
Hmm.
and they have to stay in the run, they all stay in the same run. And the only thing that you have to worry about is um, a drake trying to mate a chicken. The drake could kill the chicken. I don't have that issue. He's never tried to do it. But if you have your ducks and chickens together and you have a drake, he physically will damage a hen and she will die from that, as usually. Now, if a rooster
Hmm.
tries to mate a hen duck, he's not even the right size to get to all the parts. So it doesn't
Right.
matter. He might tear her up with his claws and pull out her feathers and stuff, but like they do a chicken. But the best thing to do if you're going to do it is not to have males of either one. But I keep them all together.
Yeah.
It's so. But well, as we start to wind this down here, because I've had you on forever. Of course, we haven't talked in ages either.
That's true.
What
That's
what do
true.
you want to be when you grow up?
Oh my goodness. Well, I talked before that we're not any spring chickens, and I am actually 7 years from retirement.
Ah.
My goal for retirement would to be to do the things I love, which is writing and two-lane renaissance and typewriter poetry and art. I mean, sure, I want to be financially secure,
Hmm.
um, but I I did have through two-lane living for 10 years. I had the opportunity to um, garden and produce our own food, which, is much, much cheaper. Once you have the supplies, the canning supplies and all that stuff,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
much, much cheaper than buying
Yeah.
food. And, the older I get, the less my body tolerates preservatives and fast foods
Hmm.
and things like that.
Hmm.
So I would like to go back to being self-reliant and being able to do what I love. Now, because of some recent things that have gone on in our community, I have been considering starting at the beginning of the year. I would like to do perhaps either a weekly podcast or a weekly video where I share news from our local publications that we have around here.
Very nice. Yeah.
Um, because one, I want to abridge some of it that's
Hmm.
presented. Other ones I want to promote. There are people that are trying to fill in the space left empty by the Her Herald.
Hmm.
There's a new publication coming out in Gilmer County that's that's online. I have subscriptions to the New York Times, the Charleston Gazette, and
Mhm.
I can't remember what movie it was, but there was a movie where a gentleman went from city to city just reading the newspapers, way back in the wild, wild west. I'm not sure that
I don't recognize
I
that
would
one.
charge for it. I'll have to look it up. I can't remember what it was. And again, as long as I give credit to the news source, I don't think I'm infringing on anything. But I've come to a point where I believe that our community is lacking um, in community information and representation. Um, I think that um, advertising and marketing in this area has gotten to a point where if you're not doing it on Facebook, you're not gonna, you're not. It takes too much effort and money to get support for ongoing events.
Mhm.
Um, Too many times the event is over or the funeral is over before you
Mhm.
find out there's even an event or that someone has
Yeah.
passed.
Yeah. I see
Um,
that
so
here where
I
I'm at.
I think that I think that what I'm going to do with my podcasts, that I've been planning on doing a podcast, 6, 7 months now, but I hadn't really figured out what my focus is or what my purpose is. And I think that's where it's going to take me. I think if I'm going to kind of be the observer of
Mhm.
state, local, national news for our community. And
Mhm.
then I'm going to present their information and my commentary
Yeah.
on it. Um, Not only because I think I will get personal satisfaction from it, but I think the community will benefit from it. There were so many people who, for example, at the craft show, um, oh, I didn't know it was going on.
Mhm.
Or,
Yeah.
the other thing was, oh, the local newspaper didn't come and cover it. Robin, the talent in that room on Saturday. I mean, I almost, I suffer from imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
But
Me too
the
sometimes, yes.
talent in that room, there was a seamstress, there were artists, there were the most gorgeous wooden bowls, gorgeous jewelry, gorgeous etched glass. I mean,
Mhm.
the talent in that room that should have been celebrated, that should have been promoted. Um,
Mhm.
it, you know, I knew that it was an 11-year annual event. I
Mhm.
am the type of person that once I, drive 22 miles out of town to go home, I'm staying home. But
Yeah. Yeah.
had I ever known um, how many to to make a point, how many tamarack quality artisans
Mhm.
we have in our community,
Mhm.
I would have been there before.
Yeah.
And, I feel like I did well, income wise, but again, that wasn't the reason I was there. Exposure was the reason I was there. But I spent most of the money I made simply
It's
because,
alright.
I can look at a crocheted poncho knowing that there's more than $30 in
Oh, yes.
yarn and
Yes.
time in that poncho. And
Mhm.
by golly, that's a deal,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
you know, I was so impressed by the talent that was there.
You need
And
to let me
there's
offer the
nobody.
suggestion that
Okay.
you connect, if you're not still connected with those artisans that and make that a section of your Substack. Focus focus on some of the folks that were there that you feel like may have been slighted for whatever reason. That would I think that
Hmm.
would be awesome if you had, a section of your Substack just for that. If you haven't already
I,
decided, because I haven't poked my head in the last couple weeks.
no, that's a wonderful suggestion. And I would like to do that because, we have a natural tendency in Gilmer County to grumble and complain and focus on the negative.
Mhm.
And you know that
I think
this year
that's everywhere.
I've been
Yeah.
watching for signs of a renaissance in the
Mhm.
positive. And we have a flower studio art place on Main Street now. We have an art gallery with art
Mhm.
classes on our Main Street now. We've got a Crafters and Beyond kind of down and around the corner.
Mhm.
Um, so I see these amazing things happening, and I see them working very hard to promote on Facebook. Um,
Mhm.
but I also see they're not getting the recognition that they deserve.
Yeah.
Um, they're not being, and I would make an assumption that probably half the people at that craft show have their own small business, okay,
Sure.
license, that they are home based businesses in our
Mhm.
community that
Mhm.
people don't even really know they exist.
Yeah.
And that was also a reason behind Two Lane Living, is because at that time, none of our local newspapers really had a lifestyle section.
Right.
They never had somebody who was just teaching you how to be healthy, smart,
Mhm.
budget, live wisely, manage stress wisely, manage life wisely,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so, I would like to see more good things presented in our community. Not to be cheesy, and not to say that we're perfect, but to
Sure.
balance out that negative mindset that says, this town's dying, which so
Right.
many West Virginia small rural towns can look around and say this town is dying. They don't
Not
have
just the
to.
small rural
Um,
ones, honey. The ones up here,
yeah, they
I
don't
mean,
have to.
go ahead.
No, I was thinking about you. I mean, um, mobile notary, you know, who thinks of mobile notary? I mean, who puts that in their mind? But that's a great way to change how that business is done. Um, we don't have a notary at our public library. So you've got to either run to this person or run to that person or chase this person down.
Mhm.
Um, and, if they're sick or they're not at work that day or they're
Right.
not, but I just thought that was an innovative and very renaissance-y kind of idea. You took
Well, it
what
was wonderful until the gas prices went to the point where it really made it, cost prohibitive for most of the jobs that I was doing. Because, you've got somebody that just needs a couple things notarized, and the actual amount you can charge for the act of notarizing is $5 per act, which is per name, that you're notarizing. But then you've got, how much is it costing me to get there? How long am I driving? Some of the stuff I was doing, I drive down to Beckley, I drive out to Huntington. So we're talking, a couple hours round trip either way. And, fuel and time, and it just I have really scaled it back because the cost of fuel has gone up quite a bit. But it I still do
well,
it.
and
I still do it.
hopefully that will pass. I think it
Yeah.
was the second or third year of Two Lane Living.
Mhm.
And we had done our business model with a certain gas price range.
Sure. Yeah.
And then we, tripled what we were
Yeah.
doing. And then, like,
Yeah.
our third or fourth year, gas went to almost $5 a gallon.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it almost killed us.
And there
And
is
we
that
survived it.
you can do online notarization in West Virginia for certain things, but it's kind of cost prohibitive for me to jump into because the demand's not there for someone like me. Now, if it's your corporation and you're dealing international and different things like that, it that's a different ball game. But for what for the market that I was serving, that's really kind of cost prohibitive to even get into that. So, I mean, I'm approved for it, but it's not. I just don't do it. But
Well, you may come back around to it. You don't know.
oh well, no, I
And
haven't. I haven't
again,
shut it down. I'll.
you and I adapt.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the things that you and I have in common is that
yeah,
we've been able to adapt to the changes in technology,
mhm,
adapt to the influences in West
mhm,
Virginia, in our country, in our culture.
yeah,
Um, and we know, like you said, if it doesn't work, okay, stop putting energy into it. Put
yeah,
energy
yeah.
somewhere
There comes a
that it
time
is
where you have to
working.
cut bait and move on, yeah. And
Yeah, and so
you
I think
have
that you are amazing in the way that you
oh,
adapt and
it's,
shift from one thing to another.
well, I've kind of forced that. It's kind of that adult ADHD kind of thing. I can't
I
tolerate
feel you.
certain amount of stuff for very long. But
I get it.
um, yeah, so in the area of Kanawha County that I live, it's not up the holla. I mean, we're down along the river, and we're not too far from the city of Bell, and we're not too far from some industry, and we're right close to the turnpike and everything. But everything around us is just drying up and dying. We've got uh, one of the um, one of the first podcasts that I did focused a little bit on the food desert, and I get so your frustration with some of the folks in your county there. I do that with City of Charleston, and I come unglued ever so often. They start screaming food desert, food desert. People have to hop a bus and go to Kanawha City to go to the grocery store. When I've got people in my county that have to drive round trip, 30 miles to come to Walmart to get groceries. And
Hmm.
I lose my mind on that every now and again. And I did a big rant on one of the first episodes of the podcast on that because one of the grocery stores in Glasgow, the only actual grocery store, not a gas station convenience store, but the only grocery store was a Save a Lot. That's high
Hmm.
dollar there. It shut down here a few weeks
Hmm.
ago, and so we've got people that have to come 8 or 9 miles out of the hollow to go just to get to Route 60 to come another 8 miles to go to Walmart to go to the grocery store, unless you want to go to a convenience store. And it frustrates me to no end. And we're one of the richest counties, and we've got some of the most destitute people. It's just insane. It drives me crazy. And I think where there's a crap ton of cash coming into this county, where is it going? But I don't really. I mean, I think about it, but I don't have time to really look into it and say, okay, where actually is it going? There's been stories that we were going to have this ammunition center two or three different times. That was supposed to be a ammunition manufacturing business. It was supposed to be established around here. Funny thing about it, every time that come up, it was right around an election time. And oh, we're going to bring this. I don't even remember the name of the company now. They're gonna start up on the hill in this old strip mine, which is across from me on the hill. They're going to build this center. We're going to put the infrastructure up here. They're gonna it's going to manufacture ammunition. Oh yay, rah rah rah! Everybody's happy, happy, happy. Reelect the same people. Doesn't happen. You know, no sign
Right.
of it. Oh well, they're going to their headquarters office is going to be in Montgomery. Really? Where is that now? This hasn't happened either. So all around me, I'm seeing these little communities and these older people just, die and their homes are collapsing around them because they can't take care of them and the property taxes are going up. But why? Because there's nothing happening here, you know. And we're going to have the big expansion of the Hatfield McCoy Trail, and we're going to put this big kayak thing in over here, and people are going to be able to kayak the Kanawha River up through here, and they're going to be able to ride their four wheelers from this county to that county across the tops of the mountains. And I'm thinking, well, it used to be you didn't want strip mines up there because they were tearing it up, but you're going to let people ride four wheelers up through there. So then my brain starts exploding, and I have to stop. But it's
I
a different
understand.
it's a different
You gotta pick
scale,
your
but it's very
battles because
similar.
it'll
Yeah.
take you down.
Yes, it will. It's a
You
different
gotta
scale,
pick your
but it's very
battles.
similar to what you're dealing with over there. And I'm just trying to think, how do I come up with enough money to put a roof on this building over here so that I can put electric back in it and either rent it out or make it. I'd like to make it a little coffee shop. and just I mean, it wouldn't be big enough for more than 4 or 5 tables and a couple of Keurig machines, but still yet a little coffee shop, little meeting spot for people. But I gotta come up with about 8 grand to put a roof on it, maybe more because it probably has a lot more roof damage than we think. But,
Well, for the
so,
most
there's
part right now, we need roof work done too, but we're
mhm,
waiting. I mean, right now I have given myself permission to be still.
yeah,
Um, I think you know as well that 2021 was a year when the universe said to me over and over again, no, 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 no. Everything I wanted to do, everything I had hoped to do, every goal that I had set,
yeah.
um, didn't work out. I mean, even quitting my job, you know, I'm
You
still
couldn't quit your
there.
job. Yeah, you couldn't quit.
You
There's
know,
nobody to take your
so
place.
nobody
Yeah,
would replace me. So, once I think right now, and especially with inflation and, prices and gas prices and um, a rising frustration and desperation in our communities,
mhm,
I've given myself permission to chill.
mhm.
I always like to push. I'm a pusher, I
Yeah,
want to do this. I got to get this
yeah.
done. I got to
I
get
I
this done. I
I
got
do
to get
that
this done.
somewhat. Mhm.
And I sit and I say, okay, Lisa, who's put this pressure on you? Did you
Yeah,
put this pressure on you? I did.
yeah,
I
yeah.
did. And in many, many ways, I don't think the universe was telling me no. I think the universe was just saying, not yet. It's
Mhm,
not the right time.
mhm.
And I believe the time will come, when hopefully we get some compassion and empathy back into our world,
Yeah,
that we will be able to grow and flourish instead of survive.
right.
And, I do think that there were enough value changes, personal value changes during COVID and the quarantine,
Mhm.
that we will begin seeing better days through, after this. We've just
Yeah,
got to get through it
yeah.
beforehand. And again, you and I mean, I remember the 70s. I remember gas
Mhm.
rations. I remember sitting
Yeah,
in line with
yeah,
my father at the gas station.
yeah,
I remember, just like we talked about, I remember the AIDS epidemic. I
yeah.
remember the polka dot fun of the 80s as well. So
Mhm.
you and I know that these things pass,
Yeah,
sometimes quickly, sometimes not, sometimes easily, sometimes
yeah,
not.
yeah,
But I do believe that it's just a not yet time, and
yeah.
that there's so many things in incubation right now, that when we get through this economic and cultural challenge, that we're going to see people and businesses and organizations blooming all over, provided we're willing to participate and support it.
Yeah,
And I know that a lot of people are struggling so hard that they can't participate and afford it now. And I
yeah.
know that, you know, our millennials that are doing relationships digitally, they're going to come to an awareness sometime that that is not a relationship,
Yeah.
that human beings are social creatures. We're
Yes,
not
we are.
digital creatures.
That's right, we are.
I had to work myself up to go to that craft show,
Mhm.
but I'm
Yeah,
so glad I did, because I came home with a sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of awe at the talent in our community. Um, I didn't sell out everything I had, but I sold one painting, and it, made my
oh,
whole day. And
good, good.
so I know, I mean, even though I'm prone to introvert and prone to be reclusive, again, I'm one of those people, I could live on the mountain all by myself for a year and not have a
And
problem.
again, we're a
I've
lot alike in that. We both are that way. We'd rather I mean, I'm okay doing this, but even yet I know that I need human touch from time to time. And I do the same thing. I'll agree to do something, and then just up until the minute it starts happening, I'm like, why did I don't want to do this? I want to just want to stay home in my pajamas, or and we struggle at this time of year with the lack of daylight hours. And you and we've
Mhm.
talked about that
Mhm.
many times before. And we haven't hit yet the hardest part of that. The hardest part of that's coming in the next few weeks when it's really dark a lot. And
Yeah.
I don't actually write it on the calendar because I don't want to have to look at it, but I know almost to the minute what day that's going to happen. And I'm trying few different things to try to maybe, ease that off a little bit, trying to up my vitamin D a little bit and see if that'll help. But I mean, we do have a lot of similarities, even with the stark differences we have in other areas. But yeah, I really feel for kids these days because they are missing out. They are really missing out on a lot of experiences, painful, some of them, yeah, but good experiences just being around people because they're staying on those phones, or they're staying in the the stereotypical kid in the basement eating Cheetos, playing World of Warcraft or whatever that game is that they used to play all the time, and not meeting real people and not know how to
Right.
talk to. I mean, it's gonna throw, in my opinion, it's gonna throw um, these folks, their social development back 10 years, easy, if not more than
And
that.
you can see it when you go onto a college campus. I was
Hmm.
teaching freshmen. You can see the challenges
Hmm.
they face, but we have to remember that we are social
Hmm.
creatures, that we
Hmm.
need each other, that we
Yeah.
need to be physically around each other,
Right.
and that you cannot develop. I think you and I are exception. I was about to say you can't develop a standing long-term relationship via the internet, and I say that while you and I are talking to each other, and we have a 20-year relationship, but we've
Yeah.
worked at it,
Yeah.
and we've
And
met in person.
we've met in person, and yeah. I mean, it's not like we're gonna get married. So, I mean, we're acquaintances, friends and acquaintances. We're
Right,
not working on a life partnership, life partner type of
right.
relationship. We're yeah, so but when you're talking about, and this, because I'm old fashioned, marriages and having families and stuff like this, you can't, there's no proven way that conception can happen on a Zoom meeting or or an online interview. I mean, there's got to be some physical stuff there. And I just there these young people are just really missing out on learning how to dance that dance of courting somebody. That's an old fashioned word, but it's still pretty good. You know, dating and learning about people, because they're just, you can use those filters and filter your picture, and then you meet somebody and it's like, ooh, ooh, that's not what your picture looked, and
Right.
then you get the rejection, and it's like, well, I
Yeah.
just feel, really really sad for a lot of our young people because they're not, and I mean, ours has been a friendship, but a business type relationship too. So um, it's not that kind of. I don't know if we would really be able to tolerate each other in person 4 or 5 days in a row. I think we might get the long knives out
I was gonna
after.
say we would have to avoid certain topics if we were
Oh,
gonna
yeah, yeah,
survive
yeah,
that.
there would be. Yeah, there would be that. I saw
And
that
that's
look.
okay.
I saw that look. You rolled your eyes. Yeah, there would be some. But, um,
Uh,
but that but, uh, we've reached a level of emotional maturity that I think even if it was a big out loud eye roll, it wouldn't do damage. And but there are some people who are so fragile that if you rolled your eyes at them, they just break down and be devastated. Just but well, I tell you what I'm going to do right now.
Uh,
Right now, I'm going to end the
okay.
recording, and you hang on a minute, and this will
Okay.
give me a break in the audio and the video where I can chop it cleanly, and then we'll finish it up off offline.